Coming to the final 16th, Our Brain Trust, Not That Brady, and Tax on the inside. The three of them across the track.
They're in the final furlong, and Mucho Gusto now pours it on. Opens up 3. HARVEY WALLBANGER got a ground-saving trip. He has the short stretch to work with, but he's under a full head of steam now.
A 5-length lead for another twist of fate. A 7-length lead as he comes to the 16th pole.
It's War of Will from Country House, then Royland, War of Will, whilst one of them again.
Cortland Simmons with you here at the CS Racing Report 2019 Road to the Kentucky Derby edition. A montage of stake races over the last couple of weeks, in which we've seen horses maneuver themselves into Kentucky Derby contention in what I call February Madness, before we get into, of course, what's officially known as March Madness, and then we get into the April races that lead into the Run for the Roses to be held at historic Churchill Downs. And right now, it looks like some horses are beginning to emerge. But again, it's very early. Things can change so quickly, like the seasons. And so looking at the races, which includes about 5 graded races, including the President's Day weekend races, the Risen Star and President's Day Monday, the Southwest Stakes at Oaklawn Park, were 3 other really interesting races in the lead up to those events that I've just mentioned. The Holy Bull Run about a couple weeks ago at Gulfstream Park, a mile and an 8, $350,000 at the 8.5 furlong distance. And this was a race in which Mijos, who had upset the favorite Code of Honor, a horse that was highly regarded after finishing second in the Champagne Stakes in October, had missed the Breeders' Cup, was being targeted for either the Kentucky Jockey Club at the same Churchill venue that held the Breeders' Cup in 2018, or the Remsen Stakes, which was ultimately chosen. In the works leading up to that, he didn't do so well, skipped the Remsen. The Mucho Macho Man was his 3-year-old debut. He did not run well, got beat by about 9 lengths, as Mijos, out of Centennial Farms, trained by Jimmy Jerkins, another New York-based trainer, son of the legendary giant killer Alan Jerkins, won that race, beat some nice horses in there, one of which was Garter and Tie. Both of these horses were just simply outrun on this day, as HARVEY WALLBANGER, in a run on the rail that kind of reminded you of Calvin Borel or Calvin Borel, skimming the rail from about 4 furlongs out. Caton Brader had noted in the pre-race that he looked good energetically. That doesn't always mean a horse going to run well, but he came through on the rail unmolested on a clean trip, got through on the rail, was able to overtake the front-running horses, including Everfast and the favorite Maximus Mischief, who won that 2018 Remsen at the 9 furlong distance. He was cutting back to a mile and a 16th in his 3-year-old debut. HARVEY WALLBANGER wins by a length, flying through on the rail, blasting through on the inside to beat Everfast, who was a neck in front of Maximus Mischief, who showed some relaxing tactics in the early going, in which the fractions were 23.18, 46.76 for the first half mile. That's a brisk pace. 110.89 for the 3/4, and then the final time was 143.69. So it could be argued that some of the horses slowed down. Obviously, that helped HARVEY WALLBANGER, who was basically steamrolling like a locomotive through the stretch. And you got to believe, at least a lot of handicappers will believe, and lay bettors, that he will like the added distance. Doesn't always turn out that way, but certainly we're going to find out whether the Florida Derby is the next target, maybe even the Fountain of Youth before that. But somewhere in there, Kenny McPeak, his trainer, is going to map out a plan, and we'll certainly find that out sooner than later if he comes out of the race as well as some would expect. So he wins that race in 143.69. Mijos and Garter and Tie, who finished 5th and 6th respectively, are now basically early tosses. You've got to toss those horses until they jump up and reemerge, if that ultimately unfolds in these next preps. And it would, probably the likelihood is they're going to stay in Florida and try to reestablish themselves. Meantime, in New York, in the Withers Stakes, speaking of the Remsen, looking at the form of that race, Tax, TAX, T-A-X, a former claimer, trained by Brian Garnigan, a horse that ran very well in there. If you remember my recap of the Remsen, he ran a really nice race before being overtaken in the last 50 to 100 yards by Network Effect, trained by Chad Brown. So that finish, Maximus Mischief, Network Effect, and Tax, who ran very well in there, was one in which people were going to try to draw a line once these horses came back, and he was able to win the Withers in a blanket finish, a race in which he showed some courage, he showed some tenacity and toughness, being squeezed on the rail. He was pinched on the rail, he squeezed through there and was able to beat Not That Brady and our Brain Trust, who had run on the very first day of the new year in the Jerome Mile to Mind Control, a horse that we're going to obviously be following closely. Greg Sacco, who is the trainer, he, along with everyone else, going to find out how far this horse can go. So that's, the thing on Mind Control, and we'll talk a little bit more about him. But Tax is able to win this race, a race in which the fractions were 23.56. And like the Holy Bull, the first half was very brisk, 47.39, 111.44, a little slower on the 3/4 compared to the Holy Bull. Final time, though, we're going a mile and 1/8 versus a mile and a 16th at Gulfstream, 150.23. So not a bad time for horses running that far that early in the year. Obviously, you want to see something a little better, but we'll find out when we start getting into the 1 mile preps, the 9 furlongs, how fast and how slow these horses are, and sort of comparing buyers as to which horse we think is going to navigate that 1.25 miles a little better than, say, another horse. And remember, in 2018, Good Magic's 95 and the Bluegrass was considered to be slow. I love the way he won that race, and to me, tactically, it felt like he could get better versus it being 95 being the best he can run, and that's going to be too slow, which we know marketably, by and large, it is a number that's not going to win you a Kentucky Derby, Preakness, or Belmont, or for that matter, any top grade one. But he was able to improve after beating those horses and ran a very good second to the eventual Triple Crown winner, Justify. So in looking at the Withers, Tax is a very interesting horse. It has been reported by his trainer and the connections that the Jeff Ruby out at Turfway Park, is gonna be the next prep. So again, unless they change their minds and decide to stay in New York and run in the Gotham and or wait for the Wood Memorial, the likelihood is he'll probably run the Jeff Ruby, and then he may go, let's say, in the Bluegrass right up the street in Lexington. That could be the progression, to go from New York to Kentucky and stay there, get acclimated, and hope to have a successful attempt and bid toward the Kentucky Derbies. But Tax is very interesting, as are the other two finishers. Remember, Tax won the Withers by a head. Not That Brady was a neck in front of our Brain Trust, who was 4 3/4 lengths in front of the 4th place horse. So it was apparent and clear those 3 horses were the class of the class in the Withers Stakes. Very good run, 150.23, the winning time for Tax, and for that matter, the other 2 horses. They were right, next to one another. And it'll be interesting to see where they fit in the grand scheme of things going on.
Tax is in tight toward the inside, trying to squeeze on through here. Coming to the final 16th, our Brain Trust, Not That Brady, and Tax on the inside. The 3 of them across the track. Tax on the inside. Our Brain Trust, Not That Brady, fights on between those 2. These 3 coming down to the line in the Withers, and Tax does it. Tax by a head on the wire. Not That Brady was second, our Brain Trust was third, and Sir Winston was fourth.